Hi, I'm Brad Archer, your favorite News Channel 41 TV host. Today, we have an exclusive interview for you guys with the President of the United States. Yes, I'll say it again, the President of the United States, Donald Trump. But before that, let's introduce today's topic, global warming. Yes, global warming, also known as climate change, climate disruption, and not only that, the climate crisis is a theory that Earth's global mean temperature is increasing at an unnatural rate due to the greenhouse gas emissions of humans. Environmentalists claim that there are increased volumes of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the global system, which are released by the burning of fossil fuels, agriculture, and other human activities. You may ask, where are all these extra gases coming from? Well, fuels such as crude oil, coal, and natural gas were created millions of years ago from the decaying of dead plants and animals. That carbon has been mostly locked away until the industrial age, when humans realized that these liquids and solids found deep in the earth could be used to produce energy. Now, all of the carbon stored in these fuels is being released into the environment at a much faster rate than it is being turned back into these forms, leading to a surplus of active carbon in the cycle. All right, now that we know the background information about fossil fuels, let's turn it to Ty Terry with President Trump at Stanford University.
Hi, I'm Ty Terry, here with President Trump at Stanford University inside the Greene Science Building. President Trump, could you please take us through your basic thoughts about global warming?
Of course, Ty. Well, I think it's just a very, very expensive form of tax. A lot of people are making a lot of money these days. Obama said in his State of the Union address that global warming is a fact. Sure, about as factual as if you like your healthcare, you can keep it. Global warming is a total and very expensive hoax. It's been proven to be a canard repeatedly over and over again. In the 1920s, people were worried about the global cooling, and it never happened. Now, it's global warming. Give me a break.
President Trump, if global warming is such a hoax to you, how do you explain the drought that happened in California last decade?
Well, I was in California during this so-called drought, and let me tell you, Ty, there was no drought. I had plenty of water, and then I asked them, what's wrong? And they said, we'll shove it out to the sea. And I said, why? And nobody even knows why, and the environmentalists don't know why. Now they're trying to protect a certain kind of 3-inch fish.
President Trump, we've seen tweets in the past about how you say that extreme cold temperatures prove that global warming doesn't exist. Can you please take us through your thoughts on that?
Sure, Ty. For example, in the beautiful Midwest, where you're from, temperatures were at an all-time low, 60 degrees below zero. In coming days, they were expected to get even cooler. People couldn't last outside for even minutes. What the hell is going on? With the global warming? I don't think so. In 2011, it snowed over 4 inches in one weekend in New York City, and it was still October. It was snowing in Israel and on the pyramids of Egypt in December of 2013. Are we still wasting billions on the global warming con? It's the same month ice storms rolled from Texas to Tennessee. I was in Los Angeles, it was freezing. Brutal and extended cold blasts could have shattered all records in 2018. Whatever happened to the global warming? Just earlier this year, I told families to be careful and try to stay in their houses. Large parts of the country were suffering from tremendous amounts of snow and near record-setting colds. It was amazing how big this system was. In the East, in December, it could have been the coldest New Year's Eve on record. Perhaps we could have used a little bit of that good old global warming that our country, but not other countries, were going to pay trillions of dollars to protect against.
Speaking of other countries, what do you think this climate issue plays on a global scale?
Ty, thank you for asking that. I think the concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive. The Chinese talk about climate change and the carbon footprint, but don't clean up their factories, but they sell us equipment to clean up ours. I think the biggest form of climate change we should worry about is nuclear weapons.
So President Trump, what would you say to all the researchers that are putting all their time and energy into trying to find a solution for this global warming issue?
Well, Ty, The global warming scientists don't want to be airlifted off the ship. They are having too much fun, and that is too simple of a solution. Fame. I think global warming scientists are a total con job. And that's all I have to say about that.
Well, President Trump, thank you for being with us and sharing your thoughts. Until next time.
Of course. Make America great again.
All right, back to you, Brad.
Thanks, Ty, and thank you, Mr. President. Here we are back at the station with world-renowned climate scientist Saayli Khambekar. Thanks for coming out today, Dr. Khambekar. What do you have to say about Mr. Trump's comments?
Thanks for having me, Brad. So, while some of Trump's comments may be a matter of personal opinion, others are completely understandable to me. First of all, I'd like to say that no one is making money from climate change. In fact, governments and communities are suffering from the costs. In a recent paper by Noah Diffenbaugh, a Stanford climate scientist, it was determined that there is a 90% or greater chance that the per capita GDP of poor countries is lower today than it would have been without global warming. Climate change has already increased the likelihood of many extremes, such as drought, rainfall, and flooding, which are known to cause damage to communities. A report from the National Resources Defense Council says by 2100, the cost of leaving climate change unchecked could amount to almost $1.9 trillion in the U.S. alone. And that's only from hurricane damage, real estate losses, energy costs, and water costs. Energy costs means paying for the increased amount of energy needed to keep things cool, such as houses and refrigerators. Water costs means providing water to the places in the U.S. that are most affected by climate change-caused drought. This brings me to the topic of the California drought.
Yes. Could you tell us about the drought in California? Was it not as real as President Trump mentioned?
It was very much real. People in towns like East Porterville were completely out of water during the height of the drought in 2016, and their whole lives were impacted by the lack of the most important resource humans need. My colleague Zach Ostroff, who's studying climate science at Stanford, documented the town's personal struggles, so I can't imagine thinking that the drought is not real. This impact has been documented not only by real-life interviews, but also in studies and predictions. Droughts are more likely to happen in years that are both warm and dry. The chance of dry years has little correlation with increased global temperature. But years do tend to be warmer than average due to climate change. Since there are more warmer years, there is more of a chance that a year will be both warm and dry, leading to more droughts. Not only did the drought definitely happen, but it was also not unexpected with the global trend of warming.
I see. What do you say about his comments on cold weather extremes?
Cold extremes. This is one issue I can definitely understand skepticism about. It's very natural to question global warming in the midst of extreme cold temperatures, especially events that severely impact daily life. I was actually in the Midwest during some of the cold blasts Trump mentioned, so this is honestly quite personal to me. But it's easy to understand when you look at this figure. As the mean global temperature increases, there is a higher chance of hot extremes and a lower chance of cold extremes. So, although there's a lesser chance of record-breaking cold temperatures with climate change going on, they are still expected to occur. Here, we see that hot extremes have become twice as likely to occur based on historical data. Maybe I missed it, but I haven't seen the president comment that hot weather extremes mean global warming is 100%. So, it's obvious he knows this concept to some degree.
I'm sure everyone does, really, but man, is it hard to ration with that weather. Dr. Khambekar, what would you say about Trump's comments regarding China?
Well, I won't say much about most of it, but I did want to point out that since the industrial age, the U.S. has made a quarter of the entire world's greenhouse gas emissions, while China has only made 13% since then. Plus, U.S. demands for goods are part of the reason that China has increased its rate of emissions so rapidly. We send so much of our manufacturing to China, so of course they'll be emitting a lot of CO2.
I'm sure as a climate scientist, his last comments were upsetting.
Well, I can't make anyone believe in science and scientists. All I can do is say that I don't want fame. I just care about my planet and want others to feel the same way about what I think is a serious issue.
Well, Dr. Khambekar, thank you for coming on the channel and helping us fact-check some of the president's comments.
Thank you, Brad.
Climate scientist Saayli Khambekar leaves us on a very important note. She says she can't make anyone believe scientists, and there's quite the discrepancy between what scientists think compared to what others think. To address this gap, we're bringing in communication expert Colby Bowman, who researches the best way to communicate climate change.
Hey Brad, how you doing?
Good, Colby. Thanks for asking. I'm excited to hear about the communication gap.
And I'm excited to tell you, Brad. I think the first step here is asking, why don't people trust scientists? We're in an age where people aren't interested in being told what to think. They'd rather know why they should think a certain way. So it makes sense that people don't trust scientists on the first go. But I want to highlight some reasons that we should trust the scientific community. First of all, scientists are very critical of their own fields. Peer review is an essential part of publishing any new findings for the whole community to see. The climate scientist Noah Diffenbaugh, who was mentioned earlier, actually made a blog post about the worst things reviewers have ever said about his paper. For example, 2 reviewers pointed out that the main conclusion of one of his papers was tautological or meaningless. Yes, 2 others in the climate science said that about his paper, and that wasn't even the worst comment. On a lighter note, I have a friend named Mandeep Gill, an astrophysics professor, who actually made an informal bet that gravitational waves wouldn't be detected in his lifetime. However, less than 10 years later, they were detected. Even someone who was very involved in the field had no idea what science would find, enough to make little bets about it. But scientists have a lot more at stake than just a case of beer. There have been situations where scientists have jumped too fast onto a new discovery, let the information out too soon, or have almost been nominated for a Nobel Prize just to have their information disproven. Their associated universities lost credibility and their departments were set back in the community. In simple words, it was embarrassing, and they had to deal with the impact on their career. Scientists have a lot of reasons to make sure what they're letting out is based in evidence and reproducible.
Reproducible? Isn't that a key point of the scientific method?
Yeah, Brad. It's one of the most important parts of making headway in science. If an experiment isn't reproducible, it isn't taken seriously by other scientists. For example, a physicist from Berkeley decided to create his own completely unbiased model of the Earth's climate to try and show climate scientists had it all wrong. The guy, Richard Muller, was backed by members of the Republican Party and by others such as the Koch Foundation to try and prove climate models wrong. Completely independently, he managed to create his own model, which ended up matching the models that climate scientists had agreed on for years.
Wow, I guess they must have been doing it right then.
They really are, Brad. Climate scientists often face disproportionate skepticism about the reproducibility of their experiments, even though they are on the same par as other scientific fields. We need to start taking their words seriously.
Well, some people do take climate scientists seriously, right? So why don't they care?
That's definitely the next question to ask. I think it's less that they don't care and more that they have too many other things to care about. Every person, family, and community has their own hardships that they need to get through that seem much more urgent than climate change, which seems more far off. One cause of this is that the media presents the issue of climate change in a fear-inducing way, showing politicians and activists extremely stressed, yelling, 12 years, 12 years, and implying that only the most drastic action can be used to combat it. Party polarization also plays a part in this, since both sides have very different methods of discussing the issue. This causes people to think they must choose between denial and action, which is a destructive environment for thoughtful discussion.
Is there anything other than the media that's stopping people from getting a true depiction of climate change, Mr. Bowman?
Other than many sources not taking the right approach to communication, there are forces that are actively trying to hold back information and policies about climate change. Oil companies profit off the fact that people don't believe in global warming. Oil and gas companies actually spend roughly $200 million a year in order to delay, control, or block policies to tackle climate change. Major oil and gas companies use social media to reach society to weaken and oppose any meaningful legislation to address global warming. Last year, $2 million were spent on targeted Facebook and Instagram ads by global oil giants and their industry bodies, promoting the benefits of increased fossil fuel production. ExxonMobil, Shell, Chevron, BP, and Total now spend about $195 million a year on branding campaigns suggesting they support action against climate change. After the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015, the large integrated oil and gas companies said they supported a price on carbon and formed groups like Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, which promote voluntary measures. However, BP donated $13 million to a campaign, also supported by Chevron, that successfully stopped carbon tax in Washington state. $1 million of which was spent on social media ads. They claim to advocate low-carbon solutions, but there's a glaring gap between their words and their actions.
It definitely sounds like it. How do we combat all of these forces that are damaging our perception of global warming?
There are actually a lot of solutions, Brad. We need to start off with trusting climate scientists at least as much as we trust scientists from other fields. But that's only the first step. Media needs to rethink how it displays the issue. It should show solutions and successful work against climate change to make it seem like an approachable issue. There's many cases where solutions were successfully implemented on both large and small scales, such as with the ozone hole over the South Pole. Countries teamed together to reduce the threat, and the hole gradually reset itself. Activists should definitely continue inspiring others to change, but there should be calmer, more evidence-based sources of information available. Rather than media implying that only drastic action can solve this issue, it should advocate for small-scale action that is much easier to digest as a regular citizen. These small-scale public actions that have large impacts include voting and choosing environmental-friendly companies over others. If more of the population votes and chooses representatives that care about climate change, we would see more action against corporations and practices that don't take the issue seriously. More voting could also give less polarized candidates a chance at the positions, which could bridge the communication gap between political parties. The best thing about this political action is that it only takes a small amount of research and a handful of days in the year to make an impact as a society. A more evolved way of impacting the global climate scene could be to choose what corporations your money supports. As consumers, we can't do much about changing a company's environmental practices, but we can show our priorities with our buying power. If possible, choose a more eco-friendly company over the large manufacturing giant, or choose electric cars over gas-fueled vehicles. If more and more people make this change, corporations will be forced to change their methods to keep making the same profit. Overall, I think people need to be shown that they have power. We are not powerless to climate change, and we most definitely aren't powerless to the bigger players like the government and big corporations. Citizens have the ability to make impactful decisions, but we're not at our full potential yet.
What would you say to our viewers out there about how they can play a part in changing the dialogue of climate change?
For all the people watching this, I want to encourage you to greet the issue of global warming with an open mind and with less skepticism right off the bat. If you have the opportunity to inform people, don't fill them with fear. Create hope and the promise of change. If you are able to, use your power as a citizen in the country and as a consumer in the market to show the big players what you care about. Even if you do none, or all of these actions, just know that your voice matters. But to show it, you have to use the energy in the right way.
Mr. Bowman, thank you for that inspiring message and for sharing your words with us today.
You're very welcome, Brad. Thank you very much.
Well, folks, that's all we have for you today from News Channel 41. We hope you've learned something or even had your perspective on global warming changed. But if not, just know that your voice matters.